This week, we are celebrating 25 years since the Sydney 2000 Olympic Games, and I'm so excited today to welcome back a very good friend to the show to help celebrate the occasion, talk through her memories of it, and celebrate everything that was the greatest Olympic Games that ever existed. It is a pleasure to welcome back to Off the Podium, Johanna Griggs. Jo, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Ben. So lovely to chat about Sydney, but also just so lovely to catch up with you.
It is exciting because we obviously had you on a few times during the Beijing Winter Olympics, just sort of as a daily catch up. But I think it's been 4 years since we had you on like the full capacity. That's crazy to think that. A bit's happened since then. Including the fact that we're here to 25 years. We were just saying off air that it has not been 25 years, a quarter of a century, Jo, since Sydney 2000. How is that possible?
It is absolutely crazy because it doesn't feel that long, but I think that's the whole thing about getting older, isn't it? You feel like you're as immature as always. It's just that your body lets you know that the years have definitely passed. But you think back to all those memories of Sydney and people still talk about what Sydney was like during that period and how friendly it was and how amazing that no traffic was and all the rest of it and the volunteers and the joy that people got out, and every naysayer who left Sydney regretted it and everyone who stayed was so happy that they did. That doesn't feel like it was 25 years ago at all.
Not at all, not in the slightest. We, a couple of years ago, did a celebratory week for the 30th anniversary of the announcement. We had people like Rick Birch on the show to kind of talk about all that sort of stuff. So obviously we're going to talk about the games in a moment, but I want to take you back 32 years ago, first of all, to 1993. Where were you when they announced it, Jo? Because you are a Sydney sider, right? So like this is your city.
I would have been working in the newsroom, to be perfectly honest, because back then I was the sports host for the 7 years. So I can't remember which day it was. I have a feeling it was it a Wednesday or a Thursday? So I wouldn't have been in the chair, but would have been reporting. But just the same as everyone else, it was just, I don't think we really knew what was coming. I certainly didn't know what was coming. I knew that it would be exciting and all those great moments of the scene. And even when you look back at the vision of that announcement, it actually looks ancient, that vision now, because obviously HD, TV, and we've been spoilt for so long now with the quality of television and broadcasting and what comes through. But you remember the leaping out of the chairs and the terrible pronunciation of Sydney. And I think from that point, it was something to get excited about. And we're watching it again now with Brisbane. I think the joy of having worked on so many Olympic Games coverage for both summers and winters is we can almost map out to the day the stories that will make headlines in the lead up to the Brisbane Games that we saw in the lead up to Sydney. Will everything be ready? It doesn't matter which games it is, which countries it is hosting it. It's like, will they make it to the line? Will they actually be able to deliver? They always deliver. Even Athens, which was very dubious, still delivered something. You could say the same, for Brazil. You could say the same for their Olympics. Okay, wasn't the greatest level of finish for a lot of things, but they still held a great game. So there'll be all the discussions about traffic. There'll be all the discussions about public transport. There'll be all the discussions about selections and all the rest. And guess what? They'll hold a great games, as did Sydney. I mean, there were a lot of negative articles in the lead up to the Sydney Olympics. There were a lot of people who decried it was going to be the, falling down of our nation and all the rest of it. But you know what? It was fantastic. It was fantastic during the course of it. It was fantastic in the lead up. And it actually did leave a pretty astonishing legacy.
Because it's hard to, I think now back to that period where, Sydney is now seen as a global city. It's seen as one of, the biggest, best cities on the planet and sort of a real icon of Australia, sells this country so well. But it wasn't always that way, was it? And a lot of people sort of credit the Olympics as kind of really helping contribute to Sydney being such a global city that it is today.
Well, it's funny when you think about it because it forced them to finish so much of the planning around the city. Like you look at Darling Harbour, and now, ironically, all of that has been redone in the last couple of years. So it does show you how quickly time does move on. But yeah, it forced them to not just be talking the talk. They actually had to show that they could, one, hold the number of people that were going to come in, that the transport could hold up. And they went to great lengths. People were blowing up that they would have designated, transport lanes just for Olympic athletes and anyone from the IOC, and then they had the media lanes. It sounded so outrageous what was being suggested, and yet that's actually a model that's almost been picked up by every major city that's hosted ever since then. Some definitely more successfully than others, but they actually pulled it off. They did a great thing. Like, it forced them to finish all the river cat ferries and the stadium. Like, I still, every time I'm out at Homebush, I look at the stadium and I think, God, I wish it still held 110, 112,000 people.
Yeah.
That was just so epic when you saw that full. I don't know how many events it would fill up like it certainly did on some of those big occasions. But even that Homebush area, everyone said it's going to be terrible. There'll be no one will stay there. You look at that area, and sometimes it can be a little bit light on, but there are the bases of almost a lot of our major sports. There's all the athletes' villages that turned into new suburbs that are now really well established and go for quite a lot of money. Like, it was very well planned and thought out.
I used to love going out there, particularly when there were multiple events on at the same time.
Yeah.
So, like, as you say, like, sometimes it was a bit light on, maybe one event, two events. But there were times you go to a concert, say at a core, and then there was a concert next door at Kudos. There was a concert at the showgrounds, and it was just the way it was sort of held. And then even I remember during the Women's World Cup, like, just sort of that atmosphere. And I got talking to a guy on the day of the final, and he was dressed like I am right now, full volunteer kit to absolutely the shoes and everything. And he was talking to me about, he was a volunteer during the Olympics, and that the vibe then was similar to what it was back during those, and just the memories. And it's interesting whenever you meet someone who, be it worked at the games, volunteered, competed, anybody, just the memories. I have family who lives in Sydney who would tell me the extraordinary stories of just going into the city during those 16 days, meeting people, mingling with everybody, and just how they had never experienced the city on that level. I mean, sort of when you grew up in Sydney to that point, could you ever imagine that Sydney would have become sort of a place like that?
I mean, I spent half my life on an aeroplane, and Sydney is not the friendliest place. If you were to do a mass generalisation, like, people will sometimes walk across a road, even if you're walking your dogs, to actually avoid saying hi. It happens all the time. Like, it's quite extraordinary. It always, I remember years ago we moved into a suburb that we've now been in for 20 odd years, but we thought it was a really villagey, lovely neighbourhood. We heard great things about. Everyone would just literally studiously drive into their garages rather than just wave and say good day to you. So I think there is an element of that with Sydney, and sometimes I look at the way that the major part of the city is designed. It's it's all designed to face the water, but you have wind tunnels that go through, so you often will see people with their head down and a jacket pulled around them. Even on a beautiful day, it can get quite cold, and so sometimes, and certainly experience I've had from friends who've come out here, they can wander around and they don't come back saying, oh wow, it's a really friendly, amazing city where everyone just stops and has a chat to you and offers you help and all the rest of it. But it actually was during those 2 weeks, whether you were on transport, like one, you just had transport that, worked, and you had volunteers that were just singing songs or encouraging or smiling or revving things up, and you had people excited about what they were going to see or what they were, all the public areas and the public spaces that they were going to go to. It actually became a thing where Sydney actually stopped all the pretenses, and it stopped all the barriers up that a lot of people have. And it was just obviously everyone felt that, because universally that was what one of the athletes said. It's what anyone who worked on the game said, and it was certainly what visitors said, that it was just this all-encompassing, welcoming, chatty, engaging, shared memories. People, from Australia and people who came out to Australia would go out to events. I think a lot of people who came out to Australia were more familiar with a lot of the events like handball and things like that. But to be honest, Australians went out to it and were just like, wow, tell me what this sport's about. Tell me, what does this mean? And people just chatted.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it doesn't always happen still to this day that that's always your experience, but it was during those games.
I find that must be an Olympic thing, because I remember having a conversation with somebody in Paris last year, the day after the Olympics, and they were sort of asking me, like, how are your experiences in Paris? What was it like? And I sort of gave my perspective, and he straight away was like, yeah, that's not us. We're rude. We're horrible. Like, you need to come back here in about a year, because clearly the Olympics are doing this. We're not this friendly. I don't know if people in Sydney would be that open about that, because I feel Sydney maybe don't have that perspective of themselves, maybe based on my time living there at least. But I do appreciate that an Olympics can change a city and a perspective and maybe give people something, a taste of a city that's not quite how it is when the Olympics aren't on.
I think that is the most, a much more accurate way than trying to something I just give it through. But yeah, even things like, I remember like the furor about the beach volleyball being played on the sands of Bondi. And then that became like the rock star event. Mm-hmm. And I remember because I was working every day on the coverage and just thinking, I'm not going to get to experience it. And there was like not a chance in the world you could get your hand on a ticket to it because that was like the hottest tickets of the whole game. So I can actually remember one day when I knew that the Australians women were going to be playing, but I went down and just sat in a cafe up on the hills of Bondi and just literally just, ordered a coffee and just found myself like giggling and laughing because you could hear all the cheering and it was, reverberating around in kind of like the bowl of Bondi. And you just like, and I wasn't the only person doing it. The cafe was full and people, even though we weren't there, we weren't actually right up next close to the action, you actually still felt a part of it. And I got a sense of, okay, I get why people are raving about this. It is like, it's like I wish tennis would sometimes be like people are just yelling and cheering and they're being encouraged by the players and, the crowd's responding. And so is all the areas around it, even outside of the venue, which, I mean, that's one of the beauties of sport, isn't it? Like sport has this incredible ability to unite people. Even in the darkest times in history, you can have moments in sport where it just has an ability to bring a positivity to the world that sometimes is very much needed. And certainly for those games, that's one of my great memories of the Sydney Games, going and sitting in a cafe and listening to a match that's still a couple of 100 metres away from me and just hearing the crowd and just getting buoyed by the sounds of people having so much fun.
Your role during those games, obviously, as you are now, you were with Channel 7 and you were hosting Olympic Sunrise, which...
co-hosting with Andrew Daddo.
Co-hosting with Andrew Daddo, which, as I was telling you off air, I was watching some footage of this. I was watching the morning after the opening ceremony. There's Andrew interviewing Nikki Webster. There you are interviewing Rick Birch. Like, I mean, it's so very September 2000. But, like, this was groundbreaking because sort of a tangent, but coming back to what I'm about to say, I was also watching some Channel 7 footage of Atlanta. And obviously it's not a home Olympics. I get it. It's not going to have the extent that a home Olympics will. But, it sort of felt very basic coverage and obviously advanced at the time. But then fast forward to 4 years later, here you are, this gorgeous backdrop of Sydney in the background. You're there every single morning. You've got access to all these people. Like, how groundbreaking was that at the time in television? Because we take this sort of stuff for granted today. But back then it was very groundbreaking.
Oh, it was unbelievable. And, to be honest, the location that we had was purely fortunate for us, but unfortunate for a Channel 7 executive who had been sacked in the 2 weeks or weeks leading up to it. And that was his home, his residence. Hence why it was like this insane residence on the water, looking at the Harbour Bridge, back towards the Opera House. And because he'd been, sent off in disgrace, that place was empty. And so one of my great mentors, Andy Kay, was like, why don't we host Recce from there? Because no matter what, we're like, because Roy and HG, obviously, we knew that they had the dream and we were doing the week leading into it. So that was great because everyone was excited about the games. But we knew once Roy and HG would start, we're like, that was, as far as entertainment on air, that was the hottest ticket in town, right? So you had athletes from all over the world who were absolutely bemused and befuddled by Roy and HG. They had this huge Australian following, but they just took things to the absolute limit. They just the things that they actually created and the moments that they did. You literally had some of the biggest names in sport who still had events to compete in, lining up to go into a show that started at 10:30, 11 at night. So when we were getting breakfast, we were like, God, is anyone going to come on our show? If you're an athlete...
They'd rather stay up late the night before and hang out with Fatso, basically, rather than come to us.
They're not going to get up at 5 a.m. to get ready to come into our show. But it actually, both of them found their own spot. Like Roy and HG were just so groundbreaking in what they did. Ours was, we had this amazing location. It was central to everything in Sydney. It was this extraordinary backdrop that was then being just entirely enjoyed by other broadcasters from all around the world because it was, probably the first time we did not in a studio. It's like, hey, take take the games to somewhere where you can look at something else as well. Like we had some days where you'd have ships coming in and you had 8 tugboats lining. So if people didn't want to listen to Andrew and I or our many fabulous guests, they could easily watch what was happening on the harbour and be thoroughly entertained. Like it was stunningly beautiful. So you had this constant backdrop that changed behind you. But also what we found is that a lot of the athletes and a lot of the guests, we were worried initially how it would fit in. They'd either arrive still drunk or they would actually arrive having had time to reflect on what they'd done. And so, one, you're getting the cream of the crop of the athletes who were the biggest stories out of the 24 hours before, but you also had them either in this incredibly reflective state of mind where they had had a chance to see their families and had a chance to get past the initial just sheer joy of emotion that's being outpoured, or they'd been out celebrating all night and then they were slightly emotional the next day. So we end up having these really unreal moments with people that were unexpected for us and definitely unexpected for them. And, I'm lucky. I actually still work with a couple of the producers who I work with on that breakfast show now on Better Homes and Gardens.
Wow.
So it's had a legacy for me in lots of different ways, but it was just such a joy. Like, we had moments. I remember when Greg Norman was coming across the Harbour Bridge and we had all these, cameras that we're going to set up. We didn't realise that with all the steel that would, every time that he'd go through certain bits, it would just lose the picture. And we had a lot of gaps we were filling in. And then next second he'd just like rock up on a car out the front and we'd follow that in. So they just tried lots of different things. And because it was working and because people were so caught up in the Sydney Olympics, we got away with a lot that we probably wouldn't have. And so it changed everything for Seven in the way that they did breakfast TV from that point on. It was the first time I think that today's stronghold had been beaten.
You birthed Koshy, and who then birthed Shervo, basically, right? Down to you and Andrew. That's how it started.
They're both big boys. I'm not sure if I'd want to birth either of those. But I think what changed is the way that they approached. And you could actually have, in amongst the news updates, you could actually have a lot of positivity and good, great storytelling and positive storytelling. And I think that's actually something that has certainly changed from what it had been previously.
3 quick fire questions then on what you just said. Who was the biggest guest you got? Who was your favourite? And who was the drunkest?
Oh, God. To be honest, drunkest, there's about 10 you could pick from. Who was the biggest? I mean, Greg Norman was big because he was such a rock star back at that stage. But then, when you're talking to Nikki Webster the day after the opening ceremony, she's about the biggest.
I'm sorry. No disrespect to Greg Norman. He's fallen down a little bit on that scale after the last few years, right? So I'm putting Nikki Webster above Greg Norman. Come on.
Like what amazed me, that girl came in, she had that extraordinary opening ceremony, absolutely stole, that show. Like she was the story that came out of the opening ceremony in what was a brilliant opening ceremony. I still think, I actually watched it when we replayed the full opening ceremony a couple of years back, and it still holds up. Like it was an exceptional opening ceremony. I think from that opening scene with the horses that came out, like it was so magic. And even culturally, the way that Ernie Dingo did the awakening ceremony, like there were just so many beautiful moments in the opening ceremony, as well as the kitsch moments, as well as the moments that we giggled at and laughed at. And I didn't watch the proper opening ceremony. I actually went out with one of my best mates who we knew was very ill with brain cancer, and we went out with a bunch of our friends and we watched the dress rehearsal, and we thought that was fantastic. And then they took it up 10 levels for the actual opening ceremony. So what Nikki Webster did was phenomenal. But then she came in and she's like this pint-sized little rocket who was so articulate and so aware of the moment that she had, but she didn't have an ego about it. So she was actually just sheer joy. But to be honest, Marion Jones was one of the rock stars of the game along with Ian Thorpe. You look at the 2 most decorated athletes. Now, of course, as we know now, Marion's had to give back all of her medals because she admitted to performance-enhancing drugs in the lead up to it. Thorpe was an absolute superstar. To get him when he was in a reflective state was pretty phenomenal. But sometimes it's always the athletes that don't always get the attention that the big sports get. So your Jai Wallaces, your Tatiana Grigorieva,
yes.
Simon Fairweather, the archery gold medalist. Like there were lots, Lauren Burns. There were lots of little moments where they might not have been the best known athletes, but for them it's probably the biggest stage that they had where people could actually get to know a little bit more of their story. And they were the really fun ones for us. And then we got to do that with some of the international athletes as well. So the whole thing was just non-stop fun, and we did the week, as I say, that week leading in, so you could build it all up, and then to watch it play out, and each day sort of exceeded the day before. Kathy, what am I talking about? Kathy Freeman.
Who? Never heard of her. What'd she do?
She had a significant role in those games, didn't she? A couple of significant roles.
Yeah, maybe. Something happened probably, sure.
So, you were spoilt for choice. You were literally spoilt every day with the guests that you had.
I'm going to backtrack. One thing I want to touch on just before the Olympics in a second, but just on the topic of Roy and HG. Were Seven aware of how big this was going to be, or did that surprise people of how big the dream actually became during those Olympics?
No, I think they had a couple of. I had obviously lots of discussions with them, and they had lots of discussions with Todd Abbott, who was one of the main producers. And I think the main thing that they wrapped their heads around was if they wanted to make it different, they had to stay out of it. They had to let those guys do whatever they wanted to do. And like you think about it these days, like probably they wouldn't get away with some of the commentary that they were doing back then.
I tried to explain it recently to a gymnast who went to Paris from the Philippines, and I don't think she quite understood what the commentary was happening in Sydney 2000. That was fun.
I don't think it would be allowed on a number of different levels.
No.
Fatso the Wombat. You wouldn't even be allowed to have, you can't have Fatso the Wombat.
Well, justice for Brisbane 2032. He should be a shoe-in. He should be a shoe-in for the mascot for Brisbane 2032, but that's just another topic, Yeah.
But like everything that they did, you probably wouldn't get away with now, but for the time, it was still pushing boundaries, but it was just so different to anything any of us had experienced. And I think that once they started and they realised the network was going to let them off the chain, and they just kept going with it. And I think they were just like, well, let's see how far we can go. And then the way that the other athletes and the media from the world responded. And like, it is funny, like, you do look back at it now, you just think, oh my gosh, there's just not a chance. Any executive or any person or the public would probably let most of that go through these days, which is a shame. And I get it, but also there's sometimes you look back at that and you go, it was also good that they could laugh at everything, and the athletes found that they could laugh at it. And I'm sure if there was anyone that was really devastatingly upset by what they'd said, they would have had on their heart been mortified and apologised profusely and genuinely. But it just wasn't taken or seen that way or dissected that way. It was just seen as pure entertainment, and they definitely carried it off, because it was, you talk to anyone about the Sydney Olympics and anyone who was in Australia who had access to it, and you had people all over the world trying to break all the codes to be able to get access to watch it from whatever country they were in, and getting snippets sent left, right and centre over the world. Yeah, it was unique for the time, and I don't think anything's ever come close to it.
Well, I was going to say, though, two things from that as well that I think the legacy of both that and Nikki Webster is that, like, on the Nikki Webster front, every opening ceremony from that point seemed to have the story through the child. And then we've seen it through networks and podcasts, and not just in Australia, overseas. Like, they've always tried to have that sort of comedy show. And it's sort of, for varying levels of success. I'd like to think that Off the Podium is maybe up there as one of the successful ones when we try to be funny.
You've actually been voted as one of the most successful Olympic podcasts in the world. So I'll say that because you're too humble.
Thank you. I just wanted to get a big head for that one, Joe. So I appreciate you taking the bait. Really enjoy that. But I mean, it birthed people like Snoop Dogg. I want to say that the legacy of a Snoop Dogg going to Paris for NBC and doing what he was doing on the ground when he was working with Kevin Hart back in Tokyo on NBC, I want to say that Roy and HG sowed the seeds for that, because we hadn't really
100%.
seen comedy Olympic shows, or sort of the Olympics were never sort of joked about much, were they, prior to Roy and HG?
No, because you had that whole, it's the gravitas of the Olympic Games, and you have to uphold it and what it means. You can still respect all of that,
of course,
but you can actually still laugh at yourself. And there are definitely moments throughout every Olympic Games that you can laugh at. Like, we talk all the time about Rio and how much of a debacle a lot of the things behind the scenes were with Rio, but it's provided us with a lot of humorous content over the years as well. When you think back to some of the things that happen, and the athletes are the same. Like, you get a bunch of athletes together that have been to a few games. they have hilarious stories either about individuals or about situations around each of those games. And when they can speak freely about it, it's a real laugh. It's really nice to actually reflect on it with a giggle.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. One thing I want to touch on, one of my vivid memories with you, Joe, was just before the Olympics started, you got to carry the torch.
Yes.
And there was that, amazing footage of you just getting so emotional around this. Now, I love montages. I always talk about the closing montage, the emotional music, and the Sydney one is one of my favorite ones. And I'm going to hold this up and we'll put this on our video one here. I sort of try to take some photos of it. He's like sort of very bad photo taken off a very bad quality screen of you just absolutely breaking down. I mean, take us through that moment because I love just seeing how much that got to you about carrying the Olympics. Because that was like the day before of the ceremony,
wasn't it? The day before. So I think I was handing to Pat Rafter and he was handing to Olivia Newton-John. So you'd gone into this briefing show. We knew it was I was so tickled pink to have been asked to do it. And I was lucky I got to carry the torch for the Athens Games as well. And the Sydney Games was particularly special because I was won the role I was going to be doing in the games. So I was so invested in the games. My boys were very, very young. I was a single mum. All my family could come out to see the carrying of the torch. And I remember, my oldest son is due the same day as his cousin. So we had the 3 boys. And so we go over to what I didn't expect was just how packed Sydney was going to be, how much they embraced the torch. I mean, we'd seen, bits of it all around Australia, but when it got to Sydney, it was next level nuts. Like there were people, it didn't matter at what level, whether it's road level, whether somebody could stand up in a garden bed, whether they could stand up on a wall, whether they could get up onto any window that opened in any office building, and then up any level, like on rooftops. You just looked at banks of people and they were all so excited about the torch. And there were lots of things. There was I can remember the briefing before, Olivia Newton-John was asking whether or not her daughter could run with her for a bit. And in the briefing, they're like, no, only the people that have been authorised can run. No one can run. And what got me really emotional is it was so exciting and it was so beautiful, and we're mucking around with everyone and chatting and you're sharing the carrying of the torch. And then I came around the corner and there were my boys and my nephew standing on the road. And I was like, oh my God, thinking in my head, first of all, like, what? I know there's 1,000 family members here, but I'm a terrible parent because my kids are where they're not allowed to be. And then just looking up at the security guy who was running with us, and I said to him, I'm so sorry, I don't know how this has happened. And he said, you know what? He said, this will be something that your boys will remember for the rest of their life. And he goes, I ran with my dad. He said, we ran up in Queensland. He said, the only thing that we all agreed would have made it better. He said, we went and watched him run. He said, it would have been if we could have run with him. And he said, so I just thought, what are they going to do? Sack me?
Put the torch out and start again.
Yeah,
no, she fucked it up. Back to Athens.
Said, so enjoy the moment with your kids. And I remembered they was absolutely gobsmacked by everything that was going on. No idea really in the context of it.
Yeah.
But for me, it was such a significant, special moment that they could be part of it. So our whole family, all our friends, and a lot of people who were around us, we were just bawling our eyes out. That's what tipped me over the edge, seeing that. And then, these hilarious moments afterwards where you've handed the torch over and they've put it out and all the rest of it. And I remember giving the boys a hug and just going, oh, my God, darlings, this is so special. I hope we remember this forever. And just remember Joe looking at me and going, can I get a donut in the ferry on the way home? Okay, so it's not that big. But, years later, the funny thing with my boys with the torches, obviously they were meant to take all the canisters out of the torches. And I didn't discover till many, many years after that our boys used to regularly host parties when I was away for work and, when they were young adults. And they worked out that the canisters had been left in both my torches. So apparently there were many an Olympic torch party where their drunk friends would run around the backyard of our place, all holding the Olympic torch and, putting on my old Olympic, outfits and things like that. So lots of cool memories with that. But, I think it was just also everyone, it wasn't just me crying. Like there were people in the crowd crying. I think that's when Sydney realised it was going to be really, really special.
I've got a prop here for our video viewers. If many people remember back, they sort of had all the giveaway. I found all these recently, Joe, when I moved. I have all these things that I've kept as a kid. So the News Corp papers did the Olympic torch relay pin album. Now it's a little bit worse, we're a bit torn, but then you sort of have, and things are falling out of it, but like you have every sort of pin on the route. And I remember when it came to Hobart too. And then, of course, being a Tasmanian, you get the Tasmanian pin there. I'm sure you would have had a New South Wales one, but just things like that, which...
I was just thinking, even at Uluru, like when they like to get the permissions around Uluru, when they started the torch relay, like that was so special.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. Like, and I think it was really fun watching, again, everyone being so cynical about it in the lead up, and then the whole country and people all around Australia, not just in Sydney, getting excited.
Yeah. And I remember coming to Hobart. I remember following it sort of in the main street down the road from where I lived. And I remember getting a taxi up before Ubers, people, to where they would light it sort of every night. They'd have that little stop. And we literally, because the traffic was so backed up, you talk about how many people there, we were like going so slow that the torch was like running next to us. So we're kind of like sticking our head out. They go like, hello. And then his little 13-year-old Ben got to hold the cauldron, or the torch at the end, sort of just memories like that, which I'm really hoping that when it does hit Brisbane and, there's going to be things like this and, maybe not to the extent, because obviously newspapers aren't quite the same, but just little things like that. Speaking of newspapers, one thing I actually also found, I have the Olympic TV guide from Sydney 2000. Joe, here we are. Your essential guide.
The stuff you keep.
It's ridiculous. Look at this. Can we just point this out, Fred? Look how good Bruce is looking back then in the lead up to it. There's Bruce.
Gorgeous Bruce.
Look at him there. Now I don't think you're quite in here, but like let's go here for example. Here we go. Monday, September 18th, 2000. 6 a.m. Olympic Sunrise, hosted by Johanna Griggs and Andrew Daddo with Chris Barth from McMahon's Point. Champions from yesterday's events and visiting stars will feature on this breakfast show with an Olympic flavour. And just look at the stacked things here on this day. We had the men's 10-metre air rifle final happening that day. Women's trap was on that day. The men's 200-metre freestyle. Ian Thorpe is tipped to win in a world record time. He didn't win that one, did he? Remember? That was Peter. Peter Van Hoogenman won the 200
in the 200, yeah. Peter got him in the 200. Yeah, the other interesting about that 200 free, Michael Phelps was in that.
That's right.
As a 15-year-old.
15-year-old, 100%. Because I always love that little fact that both Phelps and Bolt had an Olympics before they really hit the stratosphere. Because I know the Olympics account recently was sharing Bolt's first race in Athens. Yeah. Which people forget that he was there. And Phelps, you're right, 15 years old.
15. I thought he was phenomenal, obviously, but he was 17 and we were all going, my gosh, how can a 17-year-old do this? And you think what Phelps went on to do in his, there's the first of his 5 Olympics. And he holds every single record for the most decorated individual, most decorated for golds in individuals, most decorated overall. Like, he's phenomenal what he's gone on to achieve. And you think it all started there. And that and his 5th in the 200-metre butterfly were his big results.
And then the race of the century was in Athens, wasn't it? With Van Hoogenman, Thorpe and Phelps. And Hackett, of course, in that final as well, which Thorpe won. He finally got the 200-400 double. So amazing. One other thing, actually, just on the notion of pictures, here you are hosting Olympic Sunrise back in 2000. You haven't aged a day, Joe. What's going on here? Look at that. There you are. That is.
I like the fact it's not actually that clear, so that's good. You're giving me like a soft filter.
I zoom in a little bit? Is that better?
So mean. You're lucky I like you, Ben.
Well, I was a bit worried when you were talking about your boys having the Olympic torch. They were using it for something else at adult parties, but obviously they weren't quite.
They've only told me bits of it, Ben. I'm sure they probably were.
Yeah, maybe. I don't think the IOC will want to know what happens to torches basically on that level. I mean, just during the games itself, though. Your personal highlights, Joe. Let's start with the Australian ones first of all. I did actually find an article around about the Tokyo Games where you had talked about the 20th anniversary and you'd lifted some of your highlights around that. But 25 years now, your favourite, any new ones that come to you in 5 years that perhaps you didn't talk about 5 years ago for the 20th anniversary?
Well, actually, to be honest, for the 20th, we spoke about a lot more than obviously ended up in the 2-part series that we did. But there's lots of obvious ones, but there is one when I reflect on it that wasn't in there as much. But you think about it, so obviously Thorpe was huge, Kathy was huge. Mm-hmm. The Magic Monday, that night was absolutely extraordinary. And we all focus on Kathy, but there were so many things that were happening that night, both in the pool and the athletics, right? So that was just insane. But I always like Kathy's semi-final race as well, where she was in the rain.
Yeah.
and just that incredible imagery. And I know the cameraman who actually took, that incredible, those shots of her as she came around the bend, and, just everything, the drama of the suit. But even when you think back to Kathy and you forget about all the drama with Marie-Jose Perec and, pulling out the morning of the heats of the 400. And, she'd beaten Kathy, 7 out of the previous 9 times that they'd raced. And so she was going as favourite. But, all of that. There actually was quite a lot of drama in the lead up because Marion Jones, remember her husband got done for drugs and, that week leading into the games. And then there was all the conjecture and all the stuff about that. So Kathy definitely, Thorpe definitely in the pool. The one that I would reflect on that I hadn't ever mentioned, in terms of highlights, because, yes, she was phenomenal, but it was actually more her reflections around the 20 things, which was Susie O'Neill. And you think about how extraordinary Susie is with her Olympic record over a couple of games. But, because she hadn't been beaten for 6 years going into Sydney for the 200 butterfly, she saw and reflected on that for a number of years that she had failed, finishing in second place. Whereas you think, a gold and 3 silvers is a pretty phenomenal games. But I think when you look at that breaks my heart, but that's how she reflected on that, because that wasn't the memories you had of the game. So I still think about Susie getting out when she won the 200 free and doing the little dance by the pool, which she wasn't expected to win, So that's one that I wouldn't have put in there. But it's amazing how much something like that, those split-second moments, can actually impact someone's life. So in that context, yes, we talk about James Saville in the walk and, going into 200 metres before she's walking into a full packed stadium to win the gold medal and getting DQ'd, and just how absolutely, utterly devastating that was. And not even always gold medals, like Jai Tarima,
jumping Jai, it's time to fly. Yes.
But also just because he was such not your classic advocate for an athlete's lifestyle. He was so loose, and we hadn't really seen a lot of that being celebrated since, I guess, early years of rugby league. So you had him, your Jai Wallaces, the women's water polo team, like Yvette Higgins, for her to be able to score with 1.2 seconds to go.
The American coach, going off at the ref, and they focus so much on him and not the women winning the gold. Get bugger off him.
This is the moment. It's taken us to Paris for them to come, bring out our best results sort of since then. Hockey Roos, how phenomenal they were, and such a dominant performance the whole way through the games. That was exceptional. I don't think what else were the standout ones for the Australians. They're all like Simon Fairweather. All right, I'm going to mention because I know how much you love him.
He's honestly probably my favourite gold of Sydney. Controversial, but love that goal.
But literally he had to win 4, basically fights to the death. He was so cool. That's all I remember was how cool he was in those situations. And then sort of, he was going into the games. He was not given any chance or any hope. People were writing him off as a bit of a busted. He'd been around for a long time. He'd had some good results, but nothing like that. But at that stage, it was the first time Australia really invested heavily in the Korean archery coaches. And there was one coach who saw Simon and went, no, we're going to rebuild you and make you this super cool, super calm, measured athlete. And the way that he won that gold medal was so phenomenal to watch. So that was definitely up there.
He just won a freaking silver medal at the World Games in the last couple of weeks too, still going. And the thing, he kind of almost reminds me a bit of a Bradbury in a way that because a lot of people forget Stephen Bradbury was a very handy skater and it wasn't just purely luck. He was, world championship medalist, all this kind of thing. Simon Fairweather was a world champion, many years before Sydney. But similar, as you're saying, kind of people thought, oh yeah, he doesn't have a chance. But there was just something about that gold. I was hooked to it. I've always been hooked to archery ever since. And our first ever Olympic medal in archery is still our only gold medal ever in the sport.
Only gold, still to today.
We've obviously got a couple of bronzes since, but it's one of those ones that, his name will pop up every anniversary. Oh, remember these other random Sydney gold medalists? Well, I always remember Simon Fairweather as maybe my favourite. So I love that moment so much. Glued to my TV that day, Joe. I loved it.
Yeah, but that's the thing about the Olympics. You weren't the only one. It was. There were people having discussions about archery for days afterwards. I'm sure that anywhere where we had an archery set, there were people that all of a sudden took it up the sport. That's the power of the games. It can change sport and the trajectory of a sport within that, that country, because all it has to do is capture one kid's imagination.
Mm. And it's also that level of, I think, that I've always explained with Sydney that, at the time, 16 gold was completely unheard of for Australia.
Yeah.
I mean, we take it for granted now. 18 in Paris, fantastic. Let's get 20 in LA. But this is coming off the back of 9 in Atlanta. And obviously the be all and end all isn't medals. Unfortunately, we are so focused on winning medals in Australia, and that's kind of what we think it is. But just if we are going to look at that level, I mean, nearly double the amount of gold that we'd ever won ever. And now
we also had a lot of athletes for that game. So let's not forget that.
True.
I think that's what everyone was so hyped up about with Paris, because they did that phenomenal effort with, not exactly half, but not that much over as far as numbers of athletes. So.
We also need to emphasise too, because I'm on the Ben Waterworth model of medal tables, Joe, is that I think it should be sorted by.
Do you go for most?
I think it should be most. I
think it should be most.
100% think it should be. And if we're doing on that,
Sydney was our most successful.
So that's what I was about to say. I'm not disrespecting the fact that 18 gold is technically Australia's most successful Olympics in terms of how you rank medals, but our 58 medals won in Sydney has never been topped. So in terms of total medals, so
that I think that's always been a thing between Sydney, Australia and America. The Americans go for total medals; they've never ever gone for gold. So they find our medal tallies that we focused ridiculously on outrageous.
I agree. Because this is my argument: is if you went to the Olympics and you won 50 bronze medals, why are you below one country that won 1 gold medal?
Exactly.
That's not fair.
It doesn't make any sense.
It makes no sense at all. So anyway, that's a whole other
Which
level.
again, if you put that into, if you then look at Paris, so what Paris end up, they had
54, 54,
maybe 53 or 54.
Yeah.
Again, with a lot less athletes. So they're doing something right. Because I think the big thing after any host Olympics is there's a lag usually. There's a high for a little while and then there's a lag. And we certainly saw that in swimming, but now we're, back to the top of swimming. And you could probably look at it in quite a few of the different sports where, I think people start to question about the funding that they get going into a home games and all the rest of it. So I think what they did in Paris is pretty exceptional when you look at that.
We were the first country to ever top our gold medal table from the previous Olympics that we hosted. So when we obviously got the 17 in Athens. But one thing, this is a tangent.
And Tokyo. Didn't Tokyo get 17 as well?
We got 17. We equaled that. But it was it was more that we had topped our previous goal from hosting Olympics. Are you a bit worried? And again, we're not here to talk about medals. We're not here to talk about that. But we'll get to Brisbane obviously soon. But do we kind of wish that we had done that in LA and not Paris? Because if we all of a sudden get 13 gold in LA, people are going to panic, aren't they? Like, oh no, we suck, and but we don't. We don't.
Look at America with their swim team at the moment. What's happening with them? And they,
Phelps getting a bit mad.
Phelps getting very mad. And when he wrote that article, he used Sydney as you could not have a finer team than what America achieved in the Sydney Games, and then look where we've gone to. He's calling for crisis and putting himself out publicly because he's tried everything through the official channels and hasn't got anywhere. The thing that I would say, having observed so many Olympics, is it's cyclical. You're always going to have moments where, for lots of, there's a myriad of reasons that will do that. Yes, funding is a huge part of it, but also facilities is a huge part of it. So you could look at plenty of different sports that we could argue aren't as successful as they were in the past and go, okay, so where are all the facilities that they're meant to be training at? So there's lots of different factors. And there's just the natural attrition of when you have people that dominate. For probably tennis is the sport where you can't use that as an example, where you had the top 4 for so long and then you look at, Sinner and Alcaraz now and the men's and you're like, wow, we never thought we'd see that. Yeah. But I feel like you could say that in swimming. We never thought, to be honest, after Matt Biondi, that you would have somebody who is that big a superstar. And then you literally go through history and there are swimmers that literally dominate, male and female, the whole way through, that become that next big thing. It just happens. Sometimes it takes a little lag before it kicks up again. And
I wasn't in Sydney in 2000, but we all know Thought Mania, how much that was. But being in Paris last year and seeing what was on the ground, William Marchand, that was to be in a boxing venue and to literally have everybody break out in cheering. You got nothing's on the mat. What's going on? You look on your screen and you're like, oh, he's winning a gold medal on the other side of Paris right now, and that's how invested they were. Just it was, and you could not drive past every newsstand like he was everywhere. Like it was just insane.
Which I mean, obviously Thorpe's had plenty of struggles post swimming, but Simone Biles throughout her career, and then you look what she did. You look at it and you go, it really does. It's quite fascinating, and it's why I love sport, that psychology in sport, that they're able to handle those moments.
Yeah.
And, you know, like go back to Simon Fairweather, and he reckons he was in the tunnel, and by the time he, you know, put up his last little arrow, he'd already won it. But before he went out for that final death match for the gold medal, he himself said he knew he was going to win it.
Wow.
Like, imagine being that confident and that calm and that sure in all the chaos that's around you, that you just know you've got this. You've done all the work. And yet every person that lines up for anything thinks they've done all the work. So there's just something that's so brilliant about that athlete that is able to lift, and when they're able to do it constantly with that much pressure, where how would you escape that? How would you be able to breathe? Like, I just think, how would you be able to breathe and then still perform in those moments? Like those athletes that cop that kind of mania, just so much admiration for it.
Well, one of my favourite stories that emerged in the years after was Ian Thorpe telling the story about how he couldn't get his race suit on in between the 400. Like he had to jump off, get his gold medal, go and get to his suit. He couldn't get his suit on, and he's that late to the 4x100, and then goes on to create one of the most iconic moments of the Sydney Olympics. Just things like that. I mean, other things that I think, I don't know if they've almost gotten forgotten about over time, but were so big back then. Like, do you remember when it was seen as John Howard was the good luck charm of every Australian gold medal? Because I think they sort of tracked it in the first few weeks. And people don't know what I'm talking about. John Howard was the Prime Minister of Australia at the time, for our non-Australian listeners and viewers. But I think the first 5 or 6 gold medals he was just at, and it was just some stupid good luck charm. Like things like that never get talked about anymore. Like, I mean, that was maybe the most popular John Howard had ever been in the 11 years he was Prime Minister, right? Just come on, John, show up. We'll win a gold medal.
But also he was literally just sitting with the players, on the side of the hockey field, just down the sheds. Like he was just he was right in the thick of everything. He was having the time of his life. And hey, why not? Use that one chance when you have an access all areas. As you know, around any Olympics, it's not easy to get around and get access like that. So if you've got the golden ticket, I reckon I would be a super fan like him and be there for every moment I could be as well.
He was a big sports guy, John. So, I mean, he was always there. I mean, we talked about Fatso and the controversy around, wasn't it like Michael Klim was having Fatso on the podium, and a couple of the athletes were having Fatso instead of, the little boxing kangaroos or Sid Millie and Ollie and stuff like that. Yep. So they got cracked down a little bit, and obviously no official sort of capacities like that. But I got told off by our American friends over on Keep the Flame Alive because they recently did a Sydney 2000 retrospective, and they're going, how did you never tell us about Fatso? This is the greatest thing ever. And I'm like, well, I mean, as an Australian,
we could miss Fatso.
What do you want me to say? This is just part of our, culture. Fatso the fat ass wombat. That was, I mean, I guarantee you 9 out of 10 people you are on the street name the mascot for the Sydney Olympics. They're going to say Fatso and not mention Sid Millie and Ollie, or Sid Millie and Dickhead. Isn't that what they called them basically after a while?
That's exactly what they were saying.
Yeah.
And they would say wombat, and they go, one was a kookaburra, and they would have no idea.
Yep. Sid Millie and Ollie. In terms of international moments, non-Australian moments, some of your favourite moments, some of your favourite athletes that you sort of witnessed when you were there?
There's some pretty big ones, like the men's baseball.
Oh, yeah.
Australia, not a massive big sort of baseball thing, but that men's baseball final between the USA and Cuba, and it was big because it was the first time they were allowed professional players to actually play in it. So Cuba, from whenever baseball, which I think was 2 or 3 games before, had been included in the Olympics, they'd been undefeated. And then America just absolutely smashed them. That was, I remember when we were covering that was quite big at the time. Obviously, men's basketball was big.
The Vince Carter dunk. Can I just say, you talk about Vince that Magic Carter, Monday, because that was,
he was
the beach volleyball,
every
Kathy.
Headline.
Yeah, that dunk. Wow.
Yeah, that was like probably one of the most photographed moments that certainly went worldwide. There were some other like Greco-Roman wrestling. I don't even remember. I'm trying to think what his name is. He was a Russian guy, Alex.
Yeah.
Karelin, something like that.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
He basically had won the 4 Olympic Games leading into it, and they had all these legendary stories, and all the American shows where they have unlimited budgets have done these great things where the legend was he bought a fridge, and not only had he bought the fridge, but he carried the fridge up the 6 flights of stairs into his thing. Like, he was just this massive story, a massive man, and just unbeatable. And he got smashed by a American farmer, I think from Wyoming. So that was a big one. What else there's some other ones like that. Oh, diving. Like, that was the first time that we really saw the absolute domination of the Chinese divers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they were going to go for a clean sweep of every event. And then there was one American girl again in the women's platform, who was not expected to win, and she came out, she won the platform and stopped their clean sweep. And that started like that era of Chinese diving that just has
that was also
continued.
the first Olympics of synchronized diving too, so they had more that they could win at those Olympics.
And they won everything.
Yeah.
They literally cleaned up everything. And they were actually so awesome to watch. Like, you're watching like synchronized diving. I still love watching anyhow now. I just cannot believe that different body shapes and different heights can actually coordinate themselves enough in the air in split seconds to be able to make a splash that's like,
I can't even jump in a normal pool, let alone 3 and 10 fucking meters, right? Jesus Christ.
You and me both, Ben.
Yeah.
So that was huge, like following that the whole way through. What else?
Do you remember I can't remember her name, but there was all the controversy around the young Romanian gymnast who had a gold strip because she had like a period or something.
It was the all-around final, wasn't it? It was the
Nurofen or something, wasn't it? And it had drugs in it, and basically she got a gold medal stripped or something like that.
Yeah. I'm trying to that was huge. Well, that was obviously big
story.
I actually love gymnastics. Isn't that weird? Like, I'd never watched gymnastics any other time, but I actually love watching gymnastics in the Olympics. I think the key. Hattie Gabriel-Celesi,
of course,
at the 10,000, like one of the most iconic races, and that was again on it was on a night where you forget Michael Johnson won the men's 400 because Kathy won it, right? So that gets lost in the scheme of things, and he was like the equivalent, as far as big names in the world.
Yeah.
But that 10,000 meters, like when you saw them sprinting at the end of a 10,000 meter race, and that was the first time that Gabriel-Celesi had beaten him. So, and
it was El Garouge too. He sort of didn't get the gold because he got it in Athens, if I'm not mistaken. And there was sort of, you touched on the Susie O'Neill one sort of missing out on that. I remember there were a few kind of those near misses that kind of didn't happen in Sydney. I mean, backtracking to Sydney in Australia, the swimming, in Australia. I remember the Michael Klim, Jeff Hugel, wasn't it the 100 or 200 butterfly where basically they were upseated and that was a big upset, and there were sort of some of those moments that happened there. But the El Garouge one, that was a big deal that he didn't get gold in Sydney.
Mate, there's 1,000 of them. When you actually start to go through them, there's 1,000 of those little moments. And it's funny, like when you first said to me, let's have a chat about Sydney, in my head I was like, I wonder what happened to Marie-José Perec. And I looked her up, and she ended up retiring injured, and a couple of years after, and then she came out and did like a marathon for charity.
Lived the Cauldron last year in Paris. That was the first time I'd heard of her in 24 years.
But she's still their most decorated. Yeah. Well, not actually now, and not now with Martin, but like previously she was their most decorated Olympic athlete. So you sit there and you just go like, there's so many cool stories that come for each different country out of the games. So I think that's one of the great things when you sit there and you forget half of it. Literally, I forget half of these. Women's beach volleyball. I mentioned it going down and watching in Bondi, but obviously, for Nat Cook and Kerry Podhast, that was such a huge thing for them.
Yeah.
And actually set off a pretty big legacy for beach volleyball within Australia.
And it's also too some of these ones that we take beach volleyball for granted. That was only the second Olympics it had ever been in. I mean, we've got to think that, you mentioned Lauren Burns, that was the very first Taekwondo Olympics.
And BMX racing started in the Sydney Games, 100%. And now you look at what's happened over the course of BMX now, and you talk to, say, Sakaki Bara, and she will talk about, watching the BMX racing in Sydney and that being the thing where she's like, this is what I want to do. Like the family, obviously, were obviously heavily invested in it, but that's one of her earliest memories.
Yeah.
So that's the power of a games. That's the power of sport where it can be a child anywhere in any situation that just hangs on to a little dream and it ignites something in them.
And it's also kind of scary. We talk about how it's been 25 years that we get athletes on this show now, Joe, who weren't even born for Sydney 2000. I'm like, screw you, you young bloody children.
It absolutely kills me whenever you're talking to someone, you look up their birth date and it's in the thousands and you're like, wow.
My two biggest ones where I feel old now is when you're not alive for Sydney 2000, and it's a morbid one, but not alive for 9/11. I'm like, you weren't alive for 9/11? You're learning that in history books? Like, that makes me feel really old. But Sydney 2000.
What makes me feel old is when they ask for your birth date on something and you used to just like go back about 3 little winds and now I like keep winding and you're like,
you're in that lower tier.
Where's 1973? Get up here.
The other one's actually just touching on sort of big names. Like, I mean, we saw in Paris last year the hype around Noah Lyles, and then obviously we had Usain Bolt and everything sort of in between it. But the 100 meter, like Maurice Green. Like, there's a name that I feel doesn't get talked about now because of everything that's happened. Like, I mean, Marion Jones was like the face. She was gunning for 5 gold, all that kind of stuff. But as a 13-year-old boy, Maurice Green was the man. And when he won that gold, like, Maurice Green, what's happened to him? I feel he doesn't sort of do much anymore nowadays either.
But you think about how many athletes outside of a couple that you actually are aware of, what most of them have done. And that's the thing you want to actually say to those athletes in the moment. If you had one thing that if you could be like a little angel on their shoulder, it's like, enjoy every second of it, but it's not going to be the thing that probably will define you for the rest of your life because you're going to be a lot more years retired than you are actually an athlete.
Yeah.
I think another big story that we remember the women's soccer final.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Those soccer finals, men and like the Norway beating the US and then Cameroon beating Spain on penalties. Like that was mad. That was
huge,
such an upset.
Absolutely huge. And the scenes like when you then get the news vision from the various countries to watch the reactions in their home countries. That was another huge one.
Yeah. Eric the Eel, of course. Can't forget Eric.
The Eel.
Yeah.
What was it? Breaking his 2 minutes for the 100 freestyle. Yeah. But the thing people forget in that one is that like it was extraordinary and it was an amazing atmosphere in the pool and the way that everyone rallied around him. And in fact, he's actually got on to coach is quite cute. But the other 2 swimmers that he actually did that heat with, they didn't finish.
No, they both false started. Yeah.
And he was like 15 metres behind them at the 20-metre mark.
And Roy Natchez commentary just sold that even more, like when they were sort of had the extra. Yeah, I mean, we touched on him too. Peter van der Hoogman and Inge de Bruin, can't forget Inge as well, the Dutch swimming powerhouse. I was so enamored by Peter van der Hoogman. I dressed up as him for a fancy dress at school like a month afterwards. I wore like an orange shirt, put the swimming goggles on, all of that kind of level. And just what that did for, I mean, because nowadays we think of the Netherlands as a summer powerhouse as well as, you know, that sort of stuff. But just like that, I feel at that point was unheard of. I remember the great Alex Popov for Russia. You know, was he still going on back then? Because as a 13-year-old, you're like, Popov, that's a funny name. But, just going on with that sort of stuff. Like, I was very immature. I still am, Joe, let's be honest. But just it's crazy to think. And the Italian swimmer, why have I forgotten his name? Was he the one, I think, who he won a gold?
Not Massimo.
Massimo. Yeah. He was another one too. Just I used to just know every medalist off by heart. I was that obsessed with it coming down to it. But it is crazy to think that just like as you were saying, that where people are at now with their careers, because, you know, while we're trapped in 2000 thinking of these sort of people, they're obviously moved on and they're 25 years older now, Joe. And it's kind of just, it's crazy to think that. Do you think the legacy though of Sydney outside of, you know, what we perceive it as Australia and how memorable that was, like, is there a bigger legacy to it, not just for Australia, but for the Olympic Games in general? Because, I mean, it's still never been topped as the best games of all time, Joe. No one's ever said it since one, Antonio, right?
I think actually generally most people agree it still is. Like now people say, they'll say London was pretty amazing. They'll say Paris was pretty amazing for the visuals and all the rest of it. And I think the IOC is definitely getting smarter with their decision to share venues. Like I just think in modern day living and cost of living, you're always going to have people who will just tear down the Olympics. And look, even in the success of Paris, there'll still be people who go, it's ridiculous. Why don't we have all the equipment we need in our hospitals and our schools and our teachers? And there is 100% an argument for it, but there is also an argument for the good that trying to encourage kids to get active and to get out there and to dream big, and to also understand that whether it's a win or a loss, that there's lessons that can be learned through it. Because I think sometimes this, infatuation that we have with perfectionism is a little bit terrifying. So I think them being a bit smarter about the way that they do it, and like even I bagged the Rio Olympics because of what a debacle it was. The dream behind that Rio Olympics, with it being all the venues would then be turned into universities, and they'd sort out their sewage system, like for 1,000 reasons of corruption and corruption within the corruption task force and corruption within the government and all the rest of it, that didn't happen. Like when you look at those venues, and that story will come out in the lead up to Brisbane, where someone will go and get some crappy shot of every venue that's ever held an event in Sydney and say, oh, what a waste of money. Well, I don't think I don't agree. I personally don't agree with that. I think, Rio, what a shame that they couldn't actually carry that off. But there is still a place, like I'd hate to think of a world where there's not a place where I can remember the LA games, the original LA games, being rolled in on a TV in our classrooms at school and being sent to the assembly hall to watch Australians in the Olympics and to watch the Olympic Games and watch the spectacle of it. And I know as a young kid, and look, I never got to compete in the Olympics. I've been lucky enough to cover so many of them, but it absolutely captured my imagination, and it certainly set me on a pathway where I got to live overseas for lots of years, and I got to compete in all these amazing events and, make friends all over the world. That's one person. So when you think about that on a scale that is multiplied millions and millions and millions of times over, even if it's just to get them out and be a bit active for a period of a time, I think it's a really wonderful thing. And I'd hate to think of a world where it wasn't there.
You are a Commonwealth Games bronze medalist, Joe. Just want to mention that.
And a World Championship silver medalist. But I guess what? I say to people whenever everyone intros me at an event, I say it's amazing, but I probably struggle to swim from one end of the bathtub to the other these days. But the thing is, it's the memories. It's also what you learn through sport. Like everything that's ever taken me to any success in my life outside of sport, which has actually been a hell of a lot longer than my swimming career, is everything I've learned through sport. So there are a great deal of positives that for everyone that wants to bag sport and the money that's invested in sport. To me, there are as many arguments where you can say, but have a look at it. Have you thought about it from this angle? Have you thought about what it can teach and what learnings can come out of it? And I think I can attribute every success that I've ever had to everything that I learned through that period of sport.
Which leads me then to ask about Brisbane, because we are in this very unique situation where we're going to experience 2 Olympic Games in our own country in a lifetime. Obviously people who live through Melbourne and then live through Sydney, and you're still
even
with
that
us.
was 44 years, and then you look at this and you go 32 years, so the margin's shorter again. So.
Exactly. And then obviously the difference being is that, there wasn't a lot of, vision and footage to the extent of Melbourne as there will be for Sydney and things like that. But I mean, are you starting to feel that we're getting to a point where we're maybe getting a bit more excited about it, or is Australia still at that level of, we don't need this stadium, we don't need this? Because, issues aside, I personally feel that excitement isn't there to what it was in the lead up to Sydney. But I was also a lot younger when this period was happening in Sydney. But I still remember as a kid, Australia was talking about it a little bit more than we are right now with Brisbane.
Yeah, but I think that will come. I just think people are a bit more cynical, and I think part of that is like a global scale of fake news and this and that and outrage, and let's all be outraged the whole time. And I've been doing lots of shoots up in Queensland, in both southeast Queensland and in Brisbane. You go there is excitement. There is, like, you watch what's happening in. And again, the naysayers will be, the real estate's getting too expensive, but it's getting expensive because people can see the value in investing in it. And even if Com Games is not the same as an Olympic Games, but you look at how great the Com Games were on the Gold Coast.
Except for the closing ceremony, but we won't.
As like the closing ceremony.
I always have to bring that up with you.
But that 11 days of the opening ceremony and the sport, which finished on the night of the closing ceremony, to that point, like it was outstanding, and you had that same sense of pride and you had that same sense of joy. And again, you had all those same stories in the lead up there. Everyone was a naysayer and everyone had a terrible news story, and there were outrage and polls. And yes, you can always find a Karen who's going to whinge about something, But at the end of those 11 days were actually magical for the sport, and they have no doubt inspired some athletes that are watching both able-bodied and para-sport and looking at that and inspiring them, but also it changes, it creates other chances for other conversations that are bigger than sport that can come out of it.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great thing. So I think we will see it in Brisbane. It might be a little bit too early in this very jaded, cynical world, but I 100% think it'll happen.
And you just think that we're here talking 25 years of Sydney. Yeah. In 10 years' time, when we're talking 35 years of Sydney, there are going to be 3 years that have passed, and we're going to be able to sit here and go, oh, this is the Ian Thorpe, this is the, Inga de Bruin. There are people in 10 years' time who aren't even being talked about now who are going to be absolute household names. And completely agree with you all that. I've got a couple of things to touch on that. I've got this idea for the cauldron. Now, Kathy, we know Kathy's moment, iconic, right? Yeah. We had Rick Birch
including the glitch, which added to that moment.
Well, I was going to say, Rick Birch birthed this idea. Like Vancouver stole it, Sochi did it. I mean, people died when that ring didn't light up, but that's another story. Like it's almost like a thing that you have to do it in Olympics, right? So here's my idea for Brisbane, and I've actually spoken to both people involved in this, and both are kind of on board, and I'll sway them a little bit. So think about this, 60,000 in this brand new stadium. Cauldron is getting ready. People got the torch going around it. Iconic Queenslanders, you can name all of them, all right? Kieran Perkins gets the torch, right? Here's Kieran, waltzing up, everyone's cheering. Yeah.
Does he say, kick it to me, kick it to me?
Not quite. He gets there and he's about to light it, and he falls over. Everyone's like, oh no, what's happening? Who comes out of nowhere? Iconic Queenslander Stephen Bradbury. Picks up the cauldron, lights it. Now, you might be questioning he's a winter athlete, but these games are in the winter. They are in Australian winter. So therefore, he lights a cauldron, and what a moment that would be. It also levels on the Rick Birch mistake model. People think it's a mistake, but it's a planned mistake.
I actually love that idea.
So Kieran and Stephen is loosely like, yeah, all right, but they'll be blasé, but they're on board with it. Come on, that would be iconic, Joe. Come on.
Kieran is very, very serious in the corporate world now, so I'm not sure if he obviously was a great swimmer, and most swimmers are pretty unco on dry land, which I can attest to from a personal thing. So it might just naturally happen, but as long as you have Bradbury at the ready, I think that is a big possibility, and he would be 100% up for it.
Come on, do you have a giant can of his beer that you could light?
I was just thinking you'd have to make sure you checked his pockets that he couldn't pull out one of his beers.
I mean, look, there are so many iconic Queenslanders. We can name them here. Can I point out to Ariane Titmus, Tasmanian. All right, I know she swims in Queen. She'll probably be involved. I get it. But she's Owls, all right? In all seriousness, who right now would be your most iconic Queenslander who could light that cauldron, Joe?
Oh, dangerous territory and way too dangerous this far out.
You could be right, though, and we could play this in 7 years' time. Go, Joe called it.
No, I don't need to think about that. I mean, God, they'll definitely have Kathy involved. But, you've got, the Sakaki-Baras are now on the Gold Coast.
True, okay.
They all train up there now. Half of the Australian swim team now lives on the Gold Coast.
Emma McKeon's going to be involved some way. We know she'll be involved, 100%. Obviously. All jokes aside, Ariane would no doubt be involved.
Ariane 100% will be involved in some capacity, you'd imagine. But then you have to go back, and you start going back through history then, and you start going back through all your great Olympics. So, do you have Lucky Lane 6?
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many that you can have. Look, Queensland's a proud state, and I'm not taking away from the proud state of New South Wales, but I feel that Queenslanders wear it out there a little bit more on their sleeves. So I feel they're going to really shove the Queensland in your face. Whereas Sydney was great because it's all about Australiana, fantastic. But I kind of feel Queensland's going to be a bit more like Queenslander, more than New South Wales would be. I don't know if I'm wrong there, but I just feel
Isn't that a state of origin?
Yeah, well, they'll probably rub that in the faces too, right? I don't know, but
God, I don't know. I have to go back through the record books and have a look at every single individual.
They're going to get Wally Lewis, aren't they? They're like, bugger it, he wasn't Olympian.
I literally started thinking about it. I'm like, they'll probably end up doing footballers, but you don't know.
No, you're doing a fine line there with that one as well. And also in terms of Brisbane, one thing with like sports, because now obviously the Olympics are a little bit more relaxed. We can be a bit more like, hey, let's have that. Are there any sports that maybe have never been there that you would like to see, or ones that would like to be brought back that we could maybe see again in Brisbane?
Oh gosh, I mean, it sounds silly, but even sports like your softball that were in and then got taken out, they actually provided pretty great moments when they.
We do well in them, Australia, except for Tokyo. We've always won a medal in softball. So
yeah, so I would put softball back in.
It's back in LA, so keep it on the program, Brisbane. Come on.
I'm not crazy on some of the new sports that get introduced at the games. Like I feel like it's almost too flippant, but. I don't know.
We're keeping cricket. There's no way we're not keeping cricket. Come on.
See, controversially, I'm not sure that's a place for it.
You don't want it? Okay. Bring back breaking. Would you like to see breaking return?
Are we losing out?
There's a bit of a silence there that I think we'll leave. I get Ray got involved in the ceremony.
No, look, in all honesty, any sport is great when it's played at that top level. Like it is great. And you can appreciate the good and you can laugh at the parts that people think. I didn't like the pylon that we did, to be honest.
It's horrible. It's very horrible. We're friends with Ray Gunn, so we're on board with her.
Yeah, that's the thing. I just sit there and I think, like, I look at that and I go, she's an Olympian.
Yeah,
right?
100%. Never take it away from her. Yeah.
And there was a selection process in the lead up that gave her that honour.
Yep.
And so I just find the thing that's quite amazing with all that sort of stuff is that we spend our life doing anti-bullying campaigns and we spend our life, trying to encourage positive. And then you have a moment like that where whether you think it was great or whether you thought it was cringeworthy, it was still her effort and she's still an Olympian and we just piled on her as a nation. Like I just thought I actually found that just a little bit, I struggled with that.
No, 100% agree with you. And yeah, I'd love to, like, we're obviously trying to get her back on and she's obviously, dealing with what she's dealing with, but I would love to almost just do a special expose episode on just quashing these truths. And people just need to listen to the 2 interviews we did with her to have half of those like rumors answered. But anyway, whole other story in that side of things, Joe. What is your number one memory? We'll close this out. Sydney 2000, the Johanna Griggs medal in terms of your number one moment, be it a personal one, a sporting one, doesn't have to be a goal. It could be anything from Sydney 2000 that you look back 25 years ago and that was the one thing that I loved the most about those Olympics.
I remember the night of Kathy's race, just knowing that I wanted to share that moment with someone and what I'd worked out with the boys being the age they were, that going to and from home each day with the hours that I was doing was actually really disruptive to them. And so I got moved into a hotel around the corner from where we were staying because we were just, as we've done together, insane hours where you're up at crazy hours. And I remember just knowing that I wanted to share that moment with someone. So I ordered room service to come so that when Kathy was running, there was just somebody else in the room. And it was just this surreal moment where, this person came in with was something lame, like a hot chocolate, and I don't know what it was. It was some terrible thing which I didn't even need to eat. And then we just both watched Kathy's race and then just had this moment where we were just screaming and crying and jumping up and down. And then, she's just gone back to this whole, okay, well, thanks for your thing. Yeah, you've got everything you need. And I'm like, yeah, thank you very much. I'm actually going to bed now. And just like that weird thing, that's the effect that those moments in sport have. So I think that was one where you think about it now, it's like, it's such a weird thing to do. It's such a weird thing, but I'm so glad I got to share that moment with someone who I don't even know their name.
But they're telling this story to this day. They're like, my favourite story. I got to watch the Cathy Freeman gold medal with Johanna Griggs. I delivered her room service.
They would have had no idea who I was. They probably would have thought I was a complete and utter lunatic. But I know in that moment they were just as excited, and that was. Yeah, it's one of those moments. If you looked out and you were anywhere, where we were, there were high rises all around us. Everyone was watching. Everyone was watching Kathy. Everyone was willing her on.
I've never told this story before, and I'm not saying this to shame my dad because my dad's my dad, and I love my dad. But he was always one of these people I remember in the 90s who was very Arthur Tunstall. Like, why is she carrying that flag? Like, that type of person, So I always...
I was thinking boxing Arthur Tunstall, but no, the flag stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'd always like kind of, see my dad as somebody anti-Kathy Freeman, never been someone who liked her. But I never forget that night actually, back to the semi-final, when I was a 13-year-old going like, I hope she doesn't slip over. I'm a kid, right?
Yeah.
Don't say that, but don't say that, but don't say that. And then just seeing my dad's pride and just smiling and the joy of him watching Kathy win that gold medal. And that to me was like a special moment that I share from those moments of watching that race. My mum, who never liked sport, she never would sit down and watch it. She was glued to the TV. Like, as you said, everyone was glued to the TV that night.
Because it transcends sport. It's not just about who's winning and losing. It's those moments. And and Kathy made such a statement.
Yeah.
Being able to carry the Australian flag and the Aboriginal flag and being allowed to do that was brilliant, right?
Yeah.
So you sit there and you go, sometimes that's the great thing that can come out of sport. And those moments, they're bigger than just the sport. They're bigger than the individual. They transcend it. They transcend that. That's what's special about it.
Yeah, it gives you chills thinking about it after all these years, and it's just it's ridiculous to think, Joe, 25 years, 25 years.
That moment, don't you reckon? Like, the part that gave me chills that night was when Kathy sat down on the track after.
Yeah.
And whether she was just absorbing, reflecting, just completely overawed in that moment. Just that moment of thinking. I remember thinking, What have we done to you? How much pressure have we put on you
it's
as a nation and as
yeah.
being part of the media that was doing that? And I'm always really conscious of it with athletes that we build up. And I've apologised to athletes who we have built up in those moments, and then they haven't played out the way that they wanted. They didn't get that Kathy Freeman moment, because you feel responsible for that. So I'm always trying to be a little bit mindful with how far you go with it, but it's. There is a responsibility in that side of it as well that I don't think often gets taken into consideration.
It's a great point, and it is like just to think about the levels and everything that she had with that moment, and I don't know, and I know there was you're better with names than me. The Chinese runner in Beijing had a similar pressure on his shoulders. The Greek runner in Athens, like there's that level where you kind of have that national pressure and pride, but. Yeah. Was it maybe, looking forward to London? Obviously, there was numerous British athletes who had it, or maybe then Leon in Paris, like just that level of national pressure that Kathy had on her shoulders. And obviously Bruce's commentary is iconic.
Magic and iconic.
The one that always because they always generally cut it off, and we're guilty of it in our introduction too. So here I am, being saying something that I'm criticizing, but the one that I always love is Raylene Boyle after, when you hear the what a champion, what a legend, and then you hear the what a relief.
What a relief. And it was the perfect
to her sitting on that track, wasn't it? Just seeing it right there was just chills. Absolutely iconic, Joe. Joe, this has just been an absolute blast to not only get you back on the show, but to relive the Sydney Olympics and to sort of go over this and just remember it, because the most special 2 weeks in Australian sporting history, maybe even Australian history, at least this millennium, it's sort of just in terms of what that brought to this country and everything else. And hopefully we can experience a similar feeling in 7 years' time in Brisbane, and maybe we can sort of capture that magic that we had 25 years ago in Sydney. Oh, God, Ben, stop saying it.
No, I feel very lucky that it could be a part of it, and be a part of it in such a privileged and special way, because it really, as I say, the friendships, the people I still work with, the memories of that time when the crews get together that worked on those games, and you just have so many giggles when you talk about it. And now obviously Seven hasn't gotten in the Olympics and the Paralympics for such a long time that even more so we get together, and when we're not crying, we're really excited about those memories.
This is where I want to give you a moment to vent about certain other negatives. We're not doing that because we're a nice show here on Off the Podium, Joe. But
we're about positivity, Ben.
But
to be honest, even the Olympics, obviously I was a listener of your show, and then lucky enough, because I realised your prowess and your knowledge, that I could convince you to come and be my researcher, and how much fun that was.
I never, just to this day, I love telling the story about how I was literally getting in the shower and I am buck naked and my phone's ringing. I'll answer hello. It's like, blah, from Channel 7. How you doing? I'm like, good. It's like, oh, do you have a moment to talk? And I'm like, yes. Not expecting this at all, because I will always take an opportunity if I'm talking to somebody like, hey, can I give you my resume? And usually you never hear back, but I did it with you and here we are.
Yeah.
So, I appreciate it, Joe.
And we had a ball, mate. We had a ball.
We did. And even that's coming up to 4 years.
That is actually, do you know the funny thing with that? That's the gift for us if you're working on the coverage is you get to watch all the coverage. So that's a really fun part of it. And you get to see all the highlights and the moments, but it's actually who you get to share it with. Mm-hmm. So probably not dissimilar to that Kathy Freeman moment. It's the people that you gel with, that you work with, that you share those moments with. That's the memories that I'll be talking about for years to come, which, you can't talk about those moments when you're up talking publicly because people are like, who? What? Yeah. But they want to hear those moments like your Kathy Freeman one. But, it actually is, for me, probably more about the people that you're surrounded by that make it really, really special and memorable.
Well, I just appreciate the fact that you gave us a shout out on the Howie Games. So thank you for that little spike in listenership with people who listen on the Howie Games. That got us up there. So,
Yay.
Shot us up there. Joe, we appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's been fun. I'll go upstairs. I'll be all nostalgic now and Todd will be like, I'm trying to sleep.
Just put on Off the Podium. That'll put him to sleep. For everybody else who's listening and watching, the next couple of weeks, great content coming your way. We have 2 amazing interviews with 2 gold medalists from Australia. We have the amazing Nat Cook coming your way next week. We obviously spoke to Kerry Potthast a few years ago about her side of that. So great to catch up with Nat. And then we also have Tom King, Australian sailor, who has an amazing stories about his time winning gold. And we brought up Roy and HG on this episode. If you want to hear an amazing story about how he ended up on Roy and HG the day he won the gold medal, then tune into this interview. We're also going to be having a opening ceremony recap, so check that out, and I'm very looking forward to that. And we are celebrating 25 years of Sydney 2000. Like, subscribe, do all the regular things you do on the podcast, offthepodiumpod.com to get all those links, and we always appreciate your support. If you've enjoyed today's episode, my name has been Ben Waterworth, and if you haven't, it's been Noah Groves. Good night.